Hello, fellow flamenco enthusiasts, and welcome to episode 25 of Everything Flamenco. I'm your host, La Hugo, and in this episode today, we're going to chat a little bit about the general term Spanish dancing and how flamenco fits into it. So, I've said it before, and I am definitely going to say it again. The more I research flamenco, the more I find out that there is just so much more to this art form, and a lifetime is really not enough to learn. And there's so much in history, so much that's not even documented or that has contradicting information. And it's just the more I research, the more curious I get. So, today I just wanted to chat to you a little bit about the term Spanish dancing and how flamenco fits into it, because I think especially for the layman, so people that have not necessarily been exposed to flamenco in general, might think that the two are interchangeable, and in a certain way it is, because flamenco is a form of Spanish dancing, but not all Spanish dancing is flamenco. And when we talk about Spanish dancing as well, it can be a bit misleading because it is often mistakenly used to describe dances from South America as well that developed after the arrival of Spanish explorers. So people might associate the term Spanish dancing with dances that are, from Spanish speaking individuals, even like the Argentine tango and other Latin dances such as the samba and the paso doble and the Cuban salsa, because they have Spanish lyrics in the music. But each of these dances has its own unique rhythm and style, and they are showcased in competitive performances worldwide, but they are also categorized differently. So today, when we're talking about Spanish dancing, we're specifically talking about Spain, dances in Spain. And there are, well, three main categories. So the first one is flamenco, obviously, the one that we are more well known with as flamenco dancers. Which has its gypsy origins, mostly from Andalusia. We will delve into the history of flamenco a little bit more in a future episode. Then the second one is called folklorico, or regional dancing. So, and then the third one is what they call escuela bolera, or bolero school, or it can also be called the classical style. Then there's also a fourth one, apparently, but I'm not going to get into it because I haven't researched that much. But apparently, some scholars they mention a fourth style, which is called neoclassic Spanish dancing, or baile teatral, or theatrical Spanish dance. Or danza española, or it is also recognized by the International Spanish Dance Society as danza estilizada. So I need to delve into that term a little bit more, so I'm not really going to get into that today. So today we're basically going to focus on flamenco, which is your traditional Gitano rather than gypsy, because gypsy can be seen as a derogatory word. So it's your Gitano origin dances, and then your folklorico, which is your regional dancing, and your escuela bolera, which is classical. So, like I said, we are obviously most familiar with flamenco, which is your vibrant form of Spanish dancing, a type of Spanish dancing. It's evolved over more than 2,000 years on the Iberian Peninsula, influenced by a lot of different cultures and things, which we'll get into more a bit in a later episode, like I said. So, it's absorbed some South American influences, particularly in a group of songs known as Ida y Vuelta, meaning there and back, because in the 15th and the 16th centuries, soldiers and sailors were traveling between the port of Cadiz and the Americas, and they picked up some songs from the South Americas. And examples of that is the Colombiana, which comes from Colombia, and the Guajira, which is now also widely danced in flamenco, which is rooted in a Cuban song sung by tobacco plantation workers. And over time, these songs became part of the flamenco repertoire. And I really think flamenco is evolving all the time. And perhaps even between these three categories, your flamenco, your folklorico, and your escuela bolera, there are also overlaps. So it can get quite technical. I just thought it might be interesting to differentiate between the three, especially because in South Africa there is, there's different categories of Spanish dancing that's being taught. So I know some of the schools they follow the Spanish Dance Society curriculum, which will then encompass all three of these categories. And then, you have schools that teach mostly or just flamenco or mainly flamenco, which will then be obviously just one of the three categories. So then you have a folklorico or your regional dancing, which encompasses the folk dances that are unique to Spain's various provinces. So there can be variations in costumes and musical instruments and songs from one village to another. And there's apparently over 100 traditional dances that remain unchanged. And there's big differences also between the northern, the central, and southern Spain and in the Iberian Peninsula. And there's really a big difference between the region's dances. So because it spans from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic and along the Pyrenees to the Cantabrian Sea. So I stand corrected, but what I've found from a bit of research is that some of the regional or folklorical dances, for example, is the sardana, which is a typical dance of Catalonia, which is the region where Barcelona also is. The origins of this dance is not entirely traceable. Some believe that it even dates back to ancient Roman times. So it's performed by a circle of alternating men and women who hold hands, and they dance in a rhythm to a live band called a cobla. So it's a popular group dance. It's performed at celebrations and public gatherings, I think, which is the case for a lot of dancers in Spain. They really like to be social. But then there's also the muñeira, which is found in the northwestern region of Galicia. It's got a bit of Celtic influence. And then there's also the paso doble, which also forms part of your Latin dances, dances that do ballroom and Latin. Paso doble also forms part of that. It's based on the rhythm and movement of a bullfight. And its origins are actually French. So very interesting. Then you also get the bolero, I think, which is a type of dance that's found in Cuba and Spain. The Spanish bolero is apparently emerged in Spain in the 18th century. and it's accompanied by guitar music and castanets. So yeah, and I can go on. I think, but I don't want to bore you with too much detail today. So that's your folklorico, and I think a lot of that has also been incorporated into flamenco now. Like I think the Rodena, for example, possibly also would have had a folkloric origin because it originated in a ronda, and it's also a type of fandango. And then, yeah, so like I said, I can go on. And then the third category is then your escuela bolera, which people oftentimes mistakenly refer to as ballet with castanets, which is not really the case. So it's, well, there's overlap, but it's not as clear cut as that. So escuela bolera, or your classical Spanish dancing, it's a dance style that emerged in the 18th century, and it was taught in formal dance academies and performed on professional stages, and it really gained popularity across Spain and later even in the rest of Europe. It does share style and technique similarities with classical ballet, which was actually developing at the same time in the French and Italian courts. And by the 19th century, Escuela Bolera found its way into theatres in various European cities, including Paris, London, Venice, and Copenhagen. Um, and yeah, so like I said, Escuela Bolera and ballet is quite a few differences. So with Escuela Bolera, it really requires a lot of additional training. It's not exactly the same as ballet because you have to master the art of playing castanets while performing intricate movements. And the movements of the arms are apparently quite different from traditional ballet. So it's really unique and requires its own specific skill set. So the main differences noted is, the origin, obviously, of Escuela Bolera, and then the technique, like I said, as distinct arm movements, which are often circular. Um, and ballet focuses more on specific arm positions and techniques like pliés and tendus. And with the footwork, both styles utilize pointed feet and jumps, but Escuela Bolera includes unique steps and rhythms that are derived from Spanish folk dances, like certain beaten steps, which you won't have in ballet. And then, when it comes to the stylistic expression, Escuela Bolera blends the lightness with classical ballet, more with the passion and expressiveness of Spanish dance. So it creates a completely different aesthetic and emotional experience, even though you still get the classical feel of ballet from it. It's not as grounded as flamenco, for example. I do think that the lines between the three can get blurry because we also play castanets in flamenco. When we do sevillanas, which I think it's also a folkloric dance, we do use castanets, and we can use castanets in other flamenco dances as well. So it evolves all the time and it does overlap, although I think in certain instances there's quite big distinctions between the three categories. And I find it very interesting. I really wish I had enough years in my life left to explore it all in the fullest details and, do 5 dissertations and PhDs, because it really feels like I might need 5 lifetimes or more to get into all the intricacies of this, and it is so fascinating. But at least I could share a few minutes of this with you, and I hope you enjoyed it and found it as interesting as I did. So there we are already at the end of episode 25 of this podcast. I can't believe we are at 25 already. We are a quarter of a century old. um, yeah, I really love this episode, and there's so much more interesting things to come. Also, just wanted to thank everyone for listening, and please remember to send me any suggestions of things that you want to hear. Please correct me if I'm doing anything wrong. Like I said, I'm also a continuous student. I find this fascinating and interesting and challenging sometimes, but also such a wonderful learning environment. And I'll chat to you in the next episode. Ole!